You're listening to the Story By podcast. This show features short fiction with two things in common. First, I wanted to share them. Second, the rights to option or produce them for other media are available. My name is Lewayne L. White. I'll be the host and narrator. It is October, and Halloween is approaching. So of course this month I plan on doing some stories that seem appropriate for the holiday. They won't necessarily all be scary, but they'll probably include a werewolf or vampire, or demon, or zombies, or something to get us in the Halloween spirit. Actually, while we're discussing scary things, I don't do explicit tags, and generally don't do content warnings. If you need those things, consider these those warnings. Sometimes my stories have violence, sometimes there's sex, and sometimes characters say words you're not allowed to say on network TV. It's not porn, and it's not Saw or Hostel. If you're an adult, I think you can probably handle anything I'll publish here. If you're concerned about whether it's okay for your kids, give it a listen first. You'll know better than I what your kid can handle. So, now that's out of the way. Today's episode actually includes a pair of stories. The first, Worlds Apart, is a brief examination of how a couple responds to the realization that they're just not compatible. It was originally published in the online speculative fiction magazine Bewildering Stories. The second, Negotiatus, was originally written for a flash fiction competition in the local entertainment publication City View. Each story was required to contain a Des Moines landmark, a suitcase, and the line, "I think I lost my phone." It may have also required that a character be named Frank. I don't recall. I did not win that competition, but the opening line regarding 801 Grand was given special mention. It was later published in Bewildering Stories as well. Links to both pieces will be included in the show notes. Now that I've taken longer to introduce the stories than it'll probably take to read them, let's get started. Worlds Apart by Lewayne L. White. Vincent blew out a lungful of smoke, flipped back his long black hair, and said, "I can't believe we're having this conversation."
"Why not?"
Lucinda asked.
"It seems sort of inevitable. We're clearly from two different worlds, and clearly incompatible."
Vincent reached across the cafe table and stroked her hand. "But it's been fun, right?" Lucinda glanced at the long, pale fingers resting atop her tanned, slender hand. She remembered how Vincent's fingers felt on her skin, playing every nerve like... Lucinda withdrew her hand.
"That's part of the problem."
"How can having fun be a problem?"
"Oh, I don't know,"
she replied.
"How about that time with you and the stripper?"
Vincent blew out more smoke. "That again? You said you'd try sharing once."
"And I did,"
Lucinda snapped.
"I figured I loved you enough to try it once, but you didn't share. You hogged her and completely ignored my needs. The way things were going, when you were finished with her, there'd be nothing left for me."
Vincent smiled wickedly. "Your needs and mine are different. If you hadn't thrown a hissy and left, you'd have gotten what you wanted."
"What I wanted was you, Vincent. I wanted us to be together forever."
Vincent snorted. "That's a very long time, Lucy, especially for people like us." Lucinda saw his eyes glance over her shoulder. She followed their movements until a slim blonde in a miniskirt strolled past.
"And you have a wandering eye."
Vincent refocused on Lucinda again. "Two, in fact."
"What is it with you and blondes?"
"You're a redhead."
"Would it make a difference if I was a blonde?"
Vincent shrugged. "It's the 21st century, Lucy. Anything goes now. Stop living in the past."
"Maybe you should act your age," she replied. "You can't be a playboy forever."
Vincent raised an eyebrow. "Why not?"
"Everybody dies sometime."
"Sure, but not anytime soon." Lucinda looked at him over the rim of her teacup.
You don't have any plans for the future? Any goals?
That depends, Vincent said, eyes shifting again. If we're breaking up, I think she might be a goal for the future. He nodded toward a college-age girl with brunette pigtails. As the girl passed them, Vincent gave her a smile.
This is what I mean, Lucinda said. You can't focus on us for even 5 minutes at a time.
Vincent refocused again and said, Sure I can. You were talking about goals.
And?
So what do you want, Lucy? You want to get married? Have a nice church wedding with a priest, a ton of guests, and a matching set of engraved gold wedding bands? Vincent paused, then said, Well, it would have to be gold, wouldn't it? You don't do silver. He flicked the cigarette, sending ash into the wind. Then what? A house in the suburbs? Maybe raise a litter we can tote around in a minivan? He took a drag on his cigarette, blew out the smoke, and said, No way I'm going into a church. My family's lived in that manner forever, and I'm not driving anything with more than 2 doors. Furthermore, whom would we invite to the wedding? I have no living relatives, and that pack that you run with has never accepted me. He crushed out the cigarette. Besides, I'm always on the hunt for fresh blood. I can't help it. I've got a sweet tooth. You know I like the ladies.
You like the guys, too,
Vincent shrugged. Only in a pinch. Or if I'm in the mood. So this, Lucinda said, gesturing back and forth between them, this was just another fling for you? Vincent shrugged. We both know there's something I need that you never dared give me.
You know it's too risky, Vincent.
Without it, you'll never truly be mine. Lucinda folded her arms.
Is that the problem? You can't own me, so you don't want me.
Vincent shrugged again.
I won't be anyone's pet, Vincent.
Of course not, Lucy. And as strange as it seems, I couldn't stand to see you caged. Lucinda raised an eyebrow. No, really, Vincent replied. In the time we've been together, I've come to appreciate the freedom you have. You roam the world. You travel across oceans. You climb mountains. Vincent shivered. You've even crossed sun-baked deserts and cavorted on sparkling beaches. He lit another cigarette and added, It's simply amazing to someone like me, who's tied to the family land. I don't fly. I don't swim. I've never been to a beach. He paused, watching a perky blonde woman walk by. Sure, I have an enviable, hedonistic lifestyle. I'm drowning in a sea of willing partners. But after spending time with you, listening to you talk about all the places you've been, I realized I've never really lived.
Sure you have.
Well, yes, technically, Vincent replied. But it was so long ago, and things were different. It was practically the Dark Ages.
It was not,
Lucinda said.
It was the Victorian Age.
Well, regardless.
Look, Vincent, this isn't getting us anywhere. I asked to meet you to decide, without the distraction of your tongue in my ear, whether this relationship is worth pursuing.
Vincent smiled. I bet you're thinking about my tongue right now.
No.
Lucinda blushed.
Well, maybe a little, but I want more in a relationship than just your tongue.
Vincent opened his mouth to speak.
Not a word,
Lucinda said, raising a finger.
I need someone warm and caring. Someone who wants to spend the day with me, not just the night.
Vincent sighed. You knew what I was like when you met me. You didn't really think you could change that. Lucinda shrugged.
I've seen some things that suggest there might be a...
What? A cure for my condition?
Something like that.
Vincent snorted. I like what I am. When she didn't say anything, he added, Or did you want to change me into someone like you? She cocked her head.
And what's that supposed to mean?
You know exactly what I mean. Someone who's warm and fuzzy one minute and a vicious bitch the next.
That's uncalled for,
Lucinda growled. You're right, Vincent said. I'm sorry. Look, you're right. We're clearly from 2 different worlds. Lucinda sighed. Vincent rose and withdrew his wallet.
You don't have to.
Vincent shrugged. What good's a family fortune if you don't spend it? He dropped some bills on the table and said, Well, I guess this is goodbye? Lucinda stood and hugged him. She breathed in his scent, a mixture of expensive cologne and damp earth. As they stood together, Vincent stroked her hair, brushing that one spot behind her ear. She sighed. Vincent smiled, lamplight glinting off one fang. One last tummy rub? Maybe a scratch behind the ear to remember forever? It's that time of the month, Lucinda whispered. Like I'm going to mind a little blood. You know what I mean. Vincent glanced over her shoulder at the rising moon. Happy hunting, he whispered into her already shifting ear. You too, she said, and kissed his icy cheek. Negotiatus by Lewayne L. White. Frank sat on a bench near the river edge and stared up at the gleaming copper-top direction of 801 Grand thrusting up from the downtown skyline. He shifted a child-sized suitcase back and forth between his feet, glanced at his watch, and looked for the dark man. He felt a chill that didn't just come from the October wind flapping his jacket collar against his unshaven face. You've been difficult to reach, said a smoky voice behind Frank. I think I lost my phone, Frank replied without turning. Your contract is up. I'd like to renegotiate, Frank said, hands barely shaking. What part of one soul in exchange for one wish did you not understand? You got your fortune. You even had a year to spend it in. Now I get your soul. Does it have to be my soul? Frank could hear the dark man's smile. A man after my own heart. If you had one. Such bitterness, the dark man said. Didn't you enjoy your riches? I enjoyed them a lot, Frank replied. I'd like to continue enjoying them. That's why I brought you a present. Is that what's in the case? Frank leaned forward, grabbed the suitcase handle, and stood. Let me show you. Frank whipped around and roared ancient forgotten words as a mixture of herbs, fluids, and totems erupted from the case, and melted a homeless man like a screaming, stinking candle. Frank stood, stunned, staring at the pink, bubbling goo. The dark man's claw gripped Frank's neck from behind, wrapped his throat, and squeezed. Nice try, said the dark man, but I've been around a long, long time. The dark man hoisted him into the air. Frank felt the creature's grip tighten. He saw spots dancing across the sky. The dark man chuckled and slammed Frank to the ground. Frank lay in the grass, sucked in air in ragged gulps. He struggled, rolled to his side, then onto his back. He squinted up at the dark man. Any last words, Frank? 3, Frank gasped. Blessed silver bullets. The dark man's wicked smile erupted in a spray of black ichor as his head exploded. The second bullet hit his chest, sending a geyser of oily fluid from his back. Grass died instantly wherever the foul liquid touched it. The remains of the dark man sagged to the ground like a scarecrow cut from its stand. After a moment, the body began to liquefy and seep into the already polluted soil. Frank scooted out of range of the soupy mess and raised his left wrist to his mouth. Now what? Holy water, the voice crackled in his ear, followed by the incantations. Frank staggered to his feet, withdrew a 20-ounce Coke bottle from his jacket pocket, and poured the clear, sparkling contents on the dark man's remains, as though he was putting out a fire. Aman alak paro kama! Not bad. Accent's a bit weak, said a mellow tenor voice behind Frank. Frank turned to the slim blond guy who held an elaborate sniper rifle. That thing nearly killed me. Can't the big guy just smite or slay or send you with a flaming... Frank slapped the man's rifle. Sword? The young man said. Frank scowled. Why do I have to get the stink of sulfur on me while you sit a mile away? I was only about 1,300 meters away. And you have to do it
because you made the pact, and you begged for a way to escape it.
Frank looked down at the fading pool of the Dark Man. Killing 12 more of these things seems like a steep price to pay. He wrinkled his nose as if smelling genuine sulfur. On top of giving most of my fortune to charity, he added.
Perhaps you'll think twice before making another unholy pact, the other man replied, smiling.
Frank dearly wanted to smash the man's infuriating, perfect teeth. Or a holy one, Frank replied. Thanks for hanging out today. Hope you liked the stories. If you did, tell your friends. And if you didn't, tell me. Story by Podcast can be found at storybypodcast@gmail.com, facebook.com/storybypodcast, on Twitter @storybypodcast, and on iTunes. Today's episode included music provided by Kevin MacLeod, Incompetech.com, edited by Lewayne L. White, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.